Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. We'll be getting started in approximately 5 minutes. While you're waiting, if you'd like to participate in our iClicker questions, we do have a few polling questions today. We've put the course information on the screen for you, and I'll also put that in the chat panel for you as well. But you can use your instructor email or admin if you're an admin. Just use the email and password that you normally use to log into iClicker, to log in to the iClicker Reef student app to participate. And for the best experience, we do recommend watching the webinar using your computer and participating in iClicker using your mobile device. Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for our webinar, Managing Data, Grades, and Grade Sync Options in iClicker Cloud. If you're just joining us now, we have put our course information on the screen and in the questions panel for you. So if you already have an instructor account with iClicker, you can use your instructor email and password to log in, or if you're an admin, you can use the same email and password. That's join.iclicker.com, and then our course code is AMDAC. For the best experience, we recommend watching the webinar using your computer and participating in iClicker questions using your mobile device, but the participation part is totally optional. A couple more announcements before we start the presentation. We have muted everyone to keep out background noise, but we do want to hear from you. If you'd like to ask a question at any point or give us any feedback, feel free to type it into the questions panel on your screen. We'll be answering questions as they come in, but also saving some for a Q&A section at the end of the webinar. If we don't get to your question, we will be sure to follow up with you by email. And I also wanted to let you know that we are recording the webinar, and we'll email you a link to the recording and the slide deck within the next few days. That's it for housekeeping. So my name is Lindsay Thomas, and I am the Training and Documentation Manager here at iClicker. I'm very excited to introduce today's presenters, Natalie Dougal, our Training Specialist and Faculty Advocate, and Diane Saad, our iClicker Cloud Product Manager. So over to you, Natalie.
Okay, awesome. This is going to be really fun, and I'm really glad that we have as many people with us. And I really want to thank people who were able to come and meet with us after we rescheduled our last webinar. So this should be interesting and fun as we talk about managing data, grades, and grade sync options. So quickly, just want to make sure that we go over what we're going to cover today so that you can manage your expectations for what we're going to do. We've already had our lovely introductions. Um, I'm going to talk briefly about some pedagogical approaches to grading and stuff that may apply more to the instructor experience of actually deciding how to grade their students. I'll go over briefly the iClicker Cloud grade settings. And then Diane is going to come in here to talk about the different options that folks have for iClicker Grade Sync. She'll also do the roster grade sync demo. Roster grade sync is a new option that we're super excited about that should make all kinds of grade transfers a lot easier and more seamless. And then at the very end, we'll have a question and answer section. So I would love it if everyone did me a favor, and if you came here with a question, a burning question, and you really want to get your answer, I would just love it if you put it into our chat right now. That way you don't have to hold on to it till the very end. You can just get it in the chat and we'll make a note of it and make sure to answer it at the end of our time together. Um, so that's our agenda. Before we get into talking about pedagogy, which is my favorite thing in the world, I just wanted to do a quick poll of everyone here and see how many folks have actually played with the iClicker student app, possibly before today. So this is a simple yes or no question. A is yes, B is no. I can see a lot of people are already in our iClicker class and that our responses are going up super quickly. And I'll let a few more seconds go as people try and join our session. A lot of times when you have your first question of an iClicker question session, it's good to let a little bit more time go pass on the first question simply because people are joining your session. Okay, so let me give this about a few more seconds and I'm going to stop it. All right, let's go and see how it's going with this class. Oh, the vast majority of you have played with the iClicker student app before. So that's really great. It's good to play with it, see that it's fun, see that it's easy. When you go to grade your questions, it's really simple. All you have to do is do like I did and pull up the results panel. And then you can simply touch on a question to turn it green and to turn it correct. And anyone who didn't answer with that question correctly is automatically graded as being wrong. But I don't think it's wrong to have not played with the iClicker student app before now. So I'm going to grade this one as correct too. So this is a really easy way to grade your questions. It's fast, it's simple, and most of our instructors have very little trouble with it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about different scoring principles. One of the things that people bring to iClicker is a desire to make their classes more fun and to bring in principles often of gamification. Because we all know that when we're playing a learning game, we tend to learn a lot more effortlessly than when we're just having a learning experience. So one of the principles that we want to keep in mind when we come down to the nitty gritty of grading is that we want to keep scoring simple and transparent. I don't know how many of you play video games or love board games, but one of the things that makes it so that a game is not as fun is when you cannot figure out the scoring. My daughter and I were playing a game called Mr. Toast the other day, and it was really cute. The cards were cute, the concept was cute, the scoring was not cute. The scoring was not simple. It was not transparent. We played about 3 hands of it, and then we had to just kind of back away from it because the scoring was too much for us. And that's something that can translate into our classrooms too. So we want to keep scoring really simple and really transparent. We also want to make sure that we tie scores to learning outcomes, which sometimes we can think, well, aren't all scores tied to learning outcomes because it's part of a student's grade? Just because it's part of a student's grade doesn't necessarily mean that it's tied to actual mastery of a concept. So you want to make sure that your scores reflect how you want to have students judged, but you also want to be thinking about content, that you want to have your content tied to learning outcomes as well. And then the last thing to keep in mind when we're thinking about scoring principles is we want to de-emphasize the idea of winning. A lot of times when we bring up this idea of gamification, or we have this idea of, wow, I'm going to ask my students questions as I go along and I'm going to see how much they're getting it, is we can really fall into that path of, and then we can see who's winning. But when we think about learning as a process, winning is very, very infrequently our goal. You don't really go to get your PhD or your bachelor's or your master's and think to yourself, I'm really going to win this bachelor's degree. Instead, we think about earning it. We think about making progress towards a bachelor's degree. And we want to bring that into our scoring principles as well. So we want to make sure that students don't just feel like it's first place or no place. We want them to be invested in their own individual process. In that way, I like to think of iClicker as more of a golf game. You kind of play against yourself. Um, and we want to make sure that every student feels like when they participate in an iClicker session, that their grades reflect their progress. And I just wanted to briefly recommend kind of a thick, chunky book, but it's called Play to Learn, Everything You Need to Know About Designing Effective Learning Games by Sharon Bowler and Carl M. Kapp. This is a really cool, well-researched, spider smasher of a book, um, that if you're at all interested in bringing more learning games into your classroom, I really want to recommend it as something that you can take a lot of design principles from. So I want to ask another iClicker question just based on, we talked about scoring. Now we're talking about how do we award points to students for polling questions. So I'm curious how different instructors are breaking it down. So some instructors don't award any points for polling. It's purely just something that students participate in for fun. Um, Some instructors only give points for correct answers only. You can do points for participations only. And then some instructors break down points for correct answers and participation. Or maybe you're new to this and you haven't decided yet. All right, so we've got 8 responses. We had 8 responses last time, so that seems like, oh, we've got 9. So we've had actually another person join our polling session. That's always fun to see. I'm going to wait till 10. See, I'm so excited right now. All right, I'm gonna let this go for about 2 more seconds, and I'm so glad I did because I got someone else right in there. Um, so let's go ahead and look at our results. All right, so I see that we have one person who does points for correct questions only. And again, to grade a question, all I have to do is touch on it and I turn it green. If I made a mistake and I graded it as correct and it's not, I can just touch on it again and it'll return it to neutral. But this is a correct approach for some instructors. This is how their scoring plays out. And then I can see that the vast majority of folks that have joined us today give points for correct answers and participations. And then we have a few people who haven't decided yet, which I'm especially excited that those folks have joined us. So again, I can grade multiple responses as correct by simply touching on them. I can also go in and I can grade all of them as correct, even if no one has responded in these areas, simply by touching on the column. So it's a really responsive, easy system to use in the moment when you're in class. So when we think about what we just talked about before, we talked about scoring principles for learning games, how does that translate into iClicker and actually using the iClicker grading system? Number one, you want to make sure that you include an iClicker grading policy in your syllabus. Sometimes when we don't have to write out what our policy is, it's not necessarily as clear as we think that it is. So by actually writing out the syllabus, you make it clear to yourself. yourself, but also you make it clear to your students and you make it really transparent for them so that they know how they're going to be judged throughout the term. And again, once you have to write it down, a lot of times you have to also focus on making it simple. So that's something that you want to consider doing. Include it in your syllabus, and that way students know this is how I'm going to be judged, and they're not going to have a Mr. Toast situation where they feel like the way that they're being judged is maybe unreliable or too difficult. The second thing that you want to keep in mind is you want to connect iClicker questions to quiz and exam questions. So students love using iClicker. They find it a very good way to stay engaged, keeps their brains going, and they get really excited when instructors are using it. But something that doesn't make them so excited is when they participate with iClicker for maybe half of a semester and then they come in for the midterm and they find that their iClicker questions have little or no relationship to what they're being asked on the midterm. And that's a way that we have a little breakdown between how we're scoring and judging our students and giving away points and the learning outcomes for a class. So you want to make sure that there is a relationship between any of your formal assessments like quizzes and exams and your informal assessments like iClicker questions. You want to have some overlap. You want to have relationship between these two things. And you want to make that relationship explicit to your students so they understand again the transparent and they have transparency around how they're earning their points. And then lastly, I want everyone to consider awarding points for both correct answers and participation. And you might be chafing against this and you might be thinking, why in the world should anyone get anything if they're not right, if they haven't given me a right answer? And one of the reasons that we want to do this is we want to, again, de-emphasize winning and emphasize progress. So for some students, progress is simply engaging with the material and coming back to class again and again and again and engaging with material that they might find really difficult. So if a student is coming to class, and let's say they're in your bottom 20% of the class, and you have iClicker questions, and the only way they're going to earn anything is if they get things right. A lot of times when you see a policy that only gives points for a correct response and nothing else, you will see your bottom quadrant of students simply guessing. The other thing that you'll see is you will see your top 10% of students really kind of freaking out whenever an iClicker question comes up because they want to have that perfect experience. They want to have that perfect grade record. And if it's an all or nothing affair where they're either right or they're wrong, a lot of times it puts a lot of stress on something that's supposed to be designed for engagement, not really formal assessment. Um, the other thing that we see is it de-emphasizes the idea that coming to class and participating with iClicker aids in their progress. And so if we just make it about correct answers, we make it so that students are not feeling as connected to the idea of making progress. Then it becomes more about winning. And again, winners are about something other than education. We don't really talk about winning in education. We talk about progress. So, we do want to give students some credit for simply responding and then some credit for a correct response. So for today, I came into the session performance area of our settings, and I broke down the individual polling questions so that everyone gets half of a point for a correct response, and then everybody gets half of a point, excuse me, for simply responding, and that totals up to 1 point per question. And that's a fairly typical breakdown for instructors. Maybe you do 0.75 for a correct response and 0.25 simply for responding. But having some points in there for participation is a really good idea because let's think about why we brought iClicker in the first place. A lot of times we brought it in because we wanted to make participation easier and more enjoyable and to have more students participate. So let's not lose sight of those goals as we break apart our grading approaches. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Diane because Diane is going to go ahead and tell us about our different iClicker grade sync options.
All right, great. Thanks, Natalie. Well, Now you've heard about grading and scoring in iClicker, and I'm going to shift gears here to talk about ways to get those grades out of iClicker and into your LMS. Next slide, please. Right, there are 3 ways to get student grades into your LMS that I'll be talking about. There's a manual export, our LTI grade sync, and our newest roster and grade sync integration, or it can be referred to as RGS sometimes. I'll just touch on the first 2 options, but I will be demonstrating the RGS integration at the end of the presentation. Next slide. Okay, so let's start with the most basic option, which is the manual export. Next. So what do I mean by a manual export? This is the process where the instructor exports the iClicker grades to an external CSV file and then manually uploads that file into the LMS gradebook. It's pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. Here's a quick screenshot of the iClicker interface to illustrate the gradebook export option. You see there's a export button that appears on the gradebook page, and this will open a modal dialog for the instructor who would select the activities that they want to export. This will include iClicker polls, quizzes, and assignments. Right. Notice that the iClicker export supports different formats. In addition to the generic iClicker format, we have Blackboard, Brightspace by D2L, Canvas, Moodle, and Sakai. Right, and that just makes it easier to upload, as it's the expected format that the LMS is looking for on that import. Okay, next slide, please. So who should use a manual export? Right. Manual export is really the fallback method for getting iClicker grades into the LMS when one of the other sync options is not available. So this is always available to instructors for every course. So if your LMS is not set up to integrate with iClicker, and this can be because it just hasn't been set up on the back end by the IT or admin yet, or perhaps it's an LMS that iClicker integration does not support, the export option will always be available. And I don't believe there's an LMS out there that doesn't support uploading a CSV file. Right? There may be some massaging of the format, but every LMS does support some type of import. So whatever the reason for not using an LTI or RGS grade sync, I just want to emphasize that the export option always available. Now, another reason that an instructor may choose the manual export as their method to getting their grades in the LMS is really because it allows unlimited data manipulation and customization. I've seen instructors use pretty elaborate grading systems where, for example, they only count 10 polls, the highest score throughout the term, and then that poll's total equals a quiz total, and then from all the quizzes they drop a quiz. There's all sorts of elaborate algorithms that folks come up with, and if you need that data manipulation customization, getting a CSV and manipulating that spreadsheet within Excel is the way to go. All right, and as a final note about manual export is just that it's not just for grade sync. Instructors should be aware of this option in case they want to archive their grades to a local file. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this brings us to the LTI grade sync option. And this is, we're actually talking about an actual sync and not just generating an external file. All right, next slide. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the LTI sync, but I did want to provide this diagram for some high-level takeaways about it. All right, so the first thing I want to call attention to is that the LTI grade sync is not something which works right out of the box for the iClicker. It requires LMS admin setup. So your LMS does require some setup in order for this to work. Okay, so the first thing instructors will need to do is make sure that their school's LMS is prepared to work with the iClicker integration. Right. Once that's been completed, to get it to work, instructors will do a little bit of setup within their iClicker course, but most of the setup for the LTI integration is done within the LMS itself. So within the LMS course is where most of the setup action happens. Okay. Once the instructor sets up their LTI tool in the LMS. Students will interact with this tool to associate their account, and that's how we recognize and link the students to do their grade sync between their iClicker account and their LMS account. Right? Grade sync happens via from iClicker to the LMS gradebook. It's sent as a total single score for each student. This score is a total percentage of the points in iClicker. It was just translated in the LMS to points based upon how many points the instructor defined when they set up that LTI tool. All right, next slide, please. So here's some representative screenshots of what the LTI integration looks like inside of iClicker. This first screen shows the course settings integration tab, which has the setup that's required for the LTI sync. When it's turned on, it exposes a course-specific LTI link here in the settings. And this is the link that gets used by the instructor to do that setup within their LMS course. Right? When LTI sync is active, you'll now see a sync grades button in the gradebook. And notice you still have that export option, but the sync grades button appears, and clicking that sync grade button initiates that grade sync, sends those scores as a percentage to the LMS gradebook. Just as note that the grade sync only sends grades for students who have previously interacted with that LTI tool within their LMS to associate their account. But you can see here's what the UI would look like. Next slide, please. All right, so who should use the LTI grade sync option? Well, for instructors, really the dependency is that your LMS has been set up to do this integration. All right, some schools do really prefer using LTI-based integrations, and so this integration that we have from iClicker is IMS Global certified. We verified that it works with Blackboard, Brightspace by D2L, Canvas, Moodle, and Sakai. In addition, some smaller and custom LMS platforms we've also found have worked as long as they're LTI compliant. So this is a great choice for instructors. It works with a huge range of LMS platforms. And if the instructor only needs a single total grade from iClicker, it's perfectly appropriate and great integration for them. Okay, next slide. This brings us to our newest integration option, which is the roster and grade sync, or RGS option. Okay, slide. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be fully demonstrating this integration right at the end of this presentation, but I did want to at least show a high-level overview, which kind of compare it with the LTI option. So first of all, RGS is currently only available for Blackboard, Brightspace, and Canvas. So it's not, doesn't support yet Moodle or Sakai. Now we, may be expanding support to other LMSs in the future, but this time we do have RGS limited to these three options. Okay, it does, like LTI, require LMS set up by the admin. So there is this dependency that you have your school's LMS set up to work with iClicker. Right. Once that step's done, however, the iClicker course setup by the instructor is really pretty simple. It's only some steps that get done within iClicker itself. There's no setup within the LMS by the instructor. And when that happens, there's nothing for the student to interact with the LMS that they have to use to associate their account. You'll see that there's no action for students. And sync allows a roster sync from the LMS to iClicker and grade sync from iClicker to the LMS. And this grade sync can be a total points, or you can send individual activity points. So individual grade items could be created for polls, quizzes, and assignments. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so who should use this RGS option? Well, really because of this ease of use and having more advanced sync options, RGS is our recommended integration solution for schools that are using Blackboard, Brightspace by D2L, or Canvas. So really, if you're using one of these LMSs, we strongly encourage that you reach out and work with us to get your LMS set up to use the RGS integration. And it does, like I said, offer the most flexibility in sync options as well. Okay, next slide. All right, so that's kind of the high level difference between the LTI and RGS option, but I'm sure people really want to see what does this look like. So it's demo time. So Natalie, I guess you can pass me presenter and I'll run through this.
There you go.
Okay, let me show my screen. Okay, so you can see my screen here. This is my iClicker. Okay, my iClicker account here on the web. I did, in the interest of time, create a course ahead of time, but all I did was create an empty course. So let me go ahead and click into that, and I'll show you how to set up the integration, run through a roster sync and a grade sync. Okay, you can see I haven't run any sessions yet. And if I go to the people section, no one's joined my course yet. This is a fresh class. All right, if I go to settings and I go to the integrations tab, you'll see that this is set up and it says it's going to do a Canvas integration. Based upon my school, in this case, I believe I chose Macmillan Learning, that particular institution is set up to integrate with our Canvas instance. So we'll see this here. This would show Blackboard or Brightspace or any combination, depending on which LMS your admin has set up with us with that integration, right? But it's smart, so the instructor doesn't have to make any decisions. It's already telling you, you're set up for Canvas, ready to go, all right? I'm going to go ahead and connect to Canvas. It tells me, okay, we're going to need to get permission from iClicker to get your iClicker course connected to Canvas. So yes, go to Canvas. It redirects me to my Canvas instance based upon my school's setup ahead of time. We go ahead and sign in to authenticate. And it's going to ask me to authorize this tool. So yes, I authorize it. And then it goes in, it finds all the courses that I'm an instructor for in my Canvas instance and returns those courses to me. It says, well, which course did you want to link this iClicker course to? Right. So I only have these 3 courses in Canvas. You might have a much longer list. If your list is very long, you have the option to search as well as sort. So we try to make it as simple as possible for you to find your course. I'm going to go ahead and choose this course here. Hit next. Now, if your course has sections which are supported by Canvas and Brightspace, but I don't believe we have that equivalent feature in Blackboard. But if we detect that you have sections, you do have a separate step here where you can choose which section or sections you want to include in this linkage, right? You can choose all the sections and say, I want one iClicker course to correspond to my one LMS course, right? Or I can choose just a subset, like perhaps this iClicker course I'm linking is only for section 1. And then I'm going to create a separate iClicker course for section 2, and maybe a third iClicker course that's everybody. So we really allow a one-to-one or a many-to-one relationship here. I'm going to choose to go ahead with with all sections and connect. That's it. That's the setup. So very short, very simple. You just click that button, authenticate, authorize the tool, and choose which course in your LMS you want to link to. Now you can see I'm all ready to go. I can sync my roster now, or I can wait and do a sync later. It's really up to the instructor when they want to do it. I can't defer anything. So I'm going to go ahead and can't delay anything. I'm just going to go for it and sync my roster now. It goes in, looks at my Canvas roster, pulls it down, tries to find matches within the iClicker system, and we're going to be looking for profile matches based upon the LMS profile, which would be their email address primary. And if we can't find an email address match, then we will look at within that school doing a student ID match. Right? You can see that 3 students from Canvas are now enrolled in my iClicker course and good to go. So I have a roster, I believe, of 4 students in my Canvas course. 3 of them have matching profiles to an iClicker account. So we went ahead and found those students, added them automatically to my course. They get sent an email that says you've been added to this course by your instructor. They know they're ready to go. When they show up to class, they don't have to add your course, search for it or anything. They're ready to start pulling in and have their grades captured and synced up. All right. Now I do have some action that's needed. One student in my Canvas course, we couldn't find an iClicker, so they still need to be enrolled. I can view the details, and it shows me, well, here's a student that they found in my LMS, but we couldn't find a match for them in iClicker. You have the option to send them an email, and this email basically says, your instructor is trying to add you to this course. They are expecting you to have an iClicker account with, a profile that has this email, this student ID. Please create an account, and here's some steps. Or if you already have an account, here's how you update your profile so that you can be recognized, right? If you want to see what this email looks like, you can send yourself a copy of it. In fact, you can send yourself that email without even sending it to the student if you want to preview it first and then send the students the email later. But we do make that easy to see. The instructions do have images in there, so we try to make it as simple as possible for students to follow along. All right, I'm not going to send that email because I don't need to really know about that. I'm going to go ahead and close this. You can see that my settings have updated, where it's showing a summary that I've linked to this particular LMS course. Here's the sections I've linked to. And here are my options that I have for the sync itself. I can sync a total combined score as a single grade item to the LMS, right? Or you can choose to send each activity as a separate item, a separate score, to make its own grade column within the LMS. By default, we do have the total selected, and I kind of prefer that. I'm going to leave it there. You also have the option of sending over a score of 0 if the student has not responded at all to that particular activity or any at all from all the totals, right? Or you can not send a score at all. So you can send either a 0 or a no score, a skip, if students haven't participated. All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the defaults. Save that. All right, I'm going to go to my people page now. You may recall that was empty before. Now you can see it is populated. My roster does have folks added to the course. These are 3 people we found who have iClicker accounts that match their LMS profile. They're already enrolled. And here's that one student who we couldn't match. We'll still put an entry here in your roster, but they are pending. They're not actually really in the course yet. Okay. And if you want to sync the roster again, so maybe a couple of days has gone by and you've made some announcements or sent those emails to students who haven't updated their profile yet, you can sync your roster again and see if that looks better. Maybe send a reminder email. Or you can just wait until class starts. Up to you. So the roster sync itself is not automatic. It is initiated by the instructor with a one click of that button. All right. I actually want to show the grade sync portion, but to do that, I'm going to need to get some grades in here. So just give me a second. I'm just going to run a quick poll. Okay. So I will start a poll. And I'm not even going to worry about responding, or this is just to demonstrate how to get the scores into the LMS. I will stop that poll, which no one has joined, and I'm actually going to grade it. All right, so there's some points here. And I'll end class. Okay, if I refresh the page, you see my gradebook now has an entry for session 1. Here's a poll, and no one's responded. Well, that's going to be a pretty boring grade sync. So let me go ahead and add some points here. I'll give the first student, I'll give Earl 1.5, and I'll give Kekule, I'll give him 1 point. And I'll leave Pascal empty. All right, sync grades, 1 button. You see I click that, and it says, well, which activities did you want it to include to contribute towards that total? Because recall, I chose to send a single score. So you can actually choose which activities you want to be included in that score that gets sent over. I only have one session, so it's a pretty easy choice. And I click sync. Now, even though this option is called sync grades, this function will actually do a complete roster sync and then do the grade sync. So there's no need to do that roster sync from the people page before you do a grade sync, because the grade sync automatically does that for you. So at the end of the grade sync, it tells you 3 students successfully synced to my Canvas gradebook. 1 student, they still need to enroll. We couldn't find them. And once again, it's the same student. You have the option to send them that email, or maybe you're announcing it outside of class, or you want to ignore it. But you do have these actions that you can take, but it tells you also that you've had a successful grade sync. I'm going to hit close. Notice this grade sync column, these green dots are indicating these are students that are successfully grade syncing to your LMS with the sync. If there was a student that had some sort of technical problem, there would be a little alert icon, but it's all green. We had 3 successful syncs. I'm going to go to my Canvas course, go to the grades, and here you can see it is here. iClicker grade out of 2 points. Earl has 1.5, and Kekulé has 1 point, and Pascal 0. So, oh, and James, who wasn't there, the dash, because we weren't able to sync anything. So that's really the round trip experience between setup, roster sync, and grade sync. So with that, I will say I'm open to questions.
We have had a lot of great questions come in. So starting off with, if a student is dropped from the LMS, will the student also be dropped from my iClicker roster automatically if I use the roster integration option?
That's a great question. If your student has participated, well, if they were pending and then they get dropped, they'll just disappear from that roster as no longer even pending. Right? We won't be showing that anymore. If that student had actually participated in iClicker and then they dropped from the LMS, on the next grade sync, you would see a separate sort of alert that says, hey, there's some student here that they used to be syncing, they're not now any more longer, we think they dropped. And you can take a look at that list. That list, instead of having the option to email, you'll have the option to select the students and say move them to the removed list in iClicker, and that that will take them out of your course and puts them into the removed list. It doesn't permanently remove them. It just let me show that on the people page. It basically you did that and you said remove. It'll remove them that way. You can still see them if you turn them back on, but it does allow you to do that as a bit of a shortcut in case you don't want them in your course any longer. But we do leave the option that you can just leave them there in case you want to see what scores that they did participate in and have them continue to be in your gradebook in iClicker.
Okay, perfect. Next question. I'm a Blackboard admin at a school that is already set up for enhanced grade sync. How do I go about testing and setting up roster and grade sync?
Okay, well that's actually a fantastic question. We are trying to migrate all of our enhanced grade sync, which is our older option that we had. We are sunsetting that and trying to move all of those folks over to our RGS integration, because it is, like I said, so much easier to use and more robust. If you already have EGS set up, definitely going to reach out to us, and we'll work with you to get RGS set up and tested. It's very easy, and highly recommended we get this done. You'll find that students, instructors, experience is just so much easier. That it's every school that we've transitioned has been just head over heels happy about the experience.
Yeah, and a couple of follow-up questions to that. So is there an absolute last day to change over from enhanced grade sync to roster and grade sync, or can the school individually choose the day that they change?
I don't quite know if there's a hard cut over at this time. Definitely we're trying to push to get folks over to RGS for the fall as much as possible. But as far as like turning off EGS access, I don't think we're there yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, we usually try to accommodate a variety of different
Right.
term start dates.
Yep.
But
And
if
I
someone
will say
did,
that RG. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say that our RGS is set up though. We just it's per institution, so it's not like all of iClicker. So as far as like how this works, it is per institution that this will be working.
Great. And then a follow-up to that is, can the switch to RGS happen midterm if if a school wanted to do that?
Yes, and the answer is yes, yes, it can. We
Okay.
can turn it on by our RGS has flexibility. We can turn it on for the entire school, or we can actually do just by specific accounts if you want to pilot at first. If there's just one or two people you want to pilot midterm, or we can do that. When the switch gets turned on for RGS, it actually does not interfere with any course that's in progress. It goes into effect for any new course that gets created. So you can turn it on midterm without affecting anybody, right? If somebody wants to switch midterm, they would just have to turn off EGS and save. And once they turn off EGS, RGS would then appear. RGS does not overwrite if EGS is already active. So it's super flexible when you turn this on.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. And we've got a couple of questions about Brightspace by D2L.
Mhm.
So, are there any steps for that specific setup that would be done differently?
There, as far as the instructor and students go, no, it's
Hmm.
identical. The only difference is when we work with the admin to do the back end setup, there's a couple of different pieces of information. I mean, every LMS is a little bit different on how you do the setup, but there's some additional information that we would need from the admin because Brightspace, the way it handles custom roles is different. So we would need to get a list, for example, of student role IDs that need to, all the custom role IDs that need to be considered as a student. Whereas Canvas and Blackboard are a little have different mechanisms that's kind of automatic.
Okay, gotcha. And is there documentation for admins on how to set up the integration for roster and grade sync in D2L since it is a newer offering? Um, I know it's not available yet on our support site, but
Right. Yeah. If you're interested in seeing that, just reach out to us. What you know because this is the first semester that Brightspace is supported by RGS. We've had this for I think a year and a half for Canvas, Blackboard for a year, but on the very first semester that we have for LMS, we put a beta label on it. So technically, the Brightspace RGS is beta for spring. It will take that off in the summer, but while it's in this beta state, product is responsible for the documentation, which is why Lindsay said it's not on our support site yet. So I have that documentation. If you reach out to us, I'll get in touch with you and I'll send you the documentation link and be able to work with you to get that set up.
great. And I have a record of all the questions, and I can definitely make that connection, Diane.
All right,
Uh,
fantastic.
yeah. All right, we have so many questions. So we have a question about a multi-section course taught by several different faculty at an RGS Canvas institution. So a new assignment is created when each faculty does a grade sync. So Wednesday's participation, for example, ends up with 4 different assignments, one for each section that day. Is there a way to manage that to not create so much clutter?
Hmm. Wow, actually, I don't think I've seen that scenario. So on that scenario, I would say I would need to follow up and do some testing to see what's going on with that.
Okay.
But yeah.
But generally there are, like, the iClicker integration does support multi-section courses or cross-listed courses, right?
That's correct. That's correct, and that's kind of what I was showing. Or you can have you will see the list of courses, and then you could create a separate iClicker course corresponding to what is a cross-listed section essentially. But it would sync to that shell Canvas course, but just for that particular section.
Mhm. Okay. Is there, with the roster and GradeSync, is there a clean way to accommodate any students who might need to attend a different section that's not their normal section?
Unfortunately, if you allow students to go to a section that they're not enrolled in, and participate, they will not sync to the LMS because there's no match to be found within that roster, right? So that would be a manual process. So you would, for example, if you allow a student to do a makeup class and they go to a Wednesday section instead of their Monday section, then after a Wednesday section, you should just manually go in and enter that score into the correct gradebook, and then it would sync appropriately.
And that would be in the iClicker Cloud gradebook.
Within iClicker Cloud, correct. So
yeah.
Within the gradebook itself, kind of like how I showed you to get that thick, that you would come in and say, okay, that student, they attended Wednesday section and they got, 1 point or whatever. So you would just manually enter the points that they earned in the other course. And when you sync this course here, that manually edited score would be uploaded and synced.
Okay. Next question, can GradeSync only be initiated manually with the click of a button, or does GradeSync automatically update the LMS at certain intervals?
Right. Right now, it is a manually triggered sync. So we are, exploring adding in the future a timed option. But what we found is that instructors, for the first pass here, the preference was that they had control. They wanted to control when that grades were updated. So that's what we went with as our first, for the launch and for first pass.
Okay. Would the instructor need to create a grade item in the LMS first before syncing?
No, not at all. You saw, in the demo, I went through that and I just click sync. It creates that grade column for you, and so you creating it ahead of time shouldn't be something you would do. For Canvas, it creates the assignment and the grade column automatically with the sync.
Okay. Is there, this sounds like maybe a specific situation we can follow up on later, but is there a possibility that the point value in Canvas would not match with what is in iClicker?
There should not be, and I will point out that if you want to edit points, you want to make sure you do the editing here in iClicker and then do the grade sync. If you are in Canvas, for example, or whatever LMS you're using, and you edit the gradebook in your LMS, on the next grade sync, if you're syncing that activity again or a total, it will get overwritten by iClicker. So really, you want whatever score in iClicker you have, you want the gradebook in iClicker to be the source of truth, and that gets sent out and copied out to the LMS. And remember, your students in their student app are seeing their grades as well. So you want whatever the students see to match what you see to match what's in their LMS. So
yeah.
Definitely that's the preferred recommended way of doing it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Diane. Just a couple more questions. Is the student ID in iClicker supposed to match the username for a student in the LMS or their org-defined ID, which I guess is a D2L specific term from the LMS?
I believe it's the org ID for D2L. Yeah.
For D2L.
It's hard. It's the LMS is trying to get common vocabulary, but we are talking about 3 different LMSs. So yeah, I believe that's correct. And for Canvas, it's the SIS ID, but we also check with Canvas the SIS login.
Okay,
and
cool.
Blackboard, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, going through all of our questions. I used to use Sapling, and I used to set up that integration within my iClicker Cloud course, and I recently switched to using Achieve. Does iClicker offer an integration with that platform, and how do I set that up?
Okay, look, that's a great question. So in that case, if you have an Achieve course, you really want to have iClicker feed into your Achieve gradebook, and you want to do the LMS integration from your Achieve gradebook itself, not from iClicker. iClicker goes to Achieve to your LMS. And I believe we do have a webinar devoted really to that topic coming up in next month, right?
Yeah, that's right. We have another webinar coming up with Natalie on May 13th. So if you are using Achieve or supporting anyone at your institution who uses Achieve, definitely feel free to sign up for that one as well. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay, one more question came in. What exactly, what data is included in the export file?
Okay, well, the iClicker export file, the iClicker format, I believe, you have as much information as we can: student name, email, ID, their total scores, and we have the option to split out performance and participation in that case to see their points for each activity. For the different LMS specific formats, it's really depends on what that format is expecting, right? Most of the formats expect student name and an identifier, in which case we populate that with whatever the student has put in their student ID, right? But it really depends on the format itself. But you can just use an export and take a look at it. We'll do the points for the total as well as the individual activities. And when you upload that file to the LMS, I believe all of them have a step where you say, well, of all the columns that you're uploading, which of the columns do you want to create a grade item for? And you do your settings through the LMS itself.
Okay, great. All right, that's it for questions. So if there's any follow-up needed, I'll go through all of the questions and connect you with Diane. And then in the next few days, we'll be sending an email with a recording of the webinar and the slide deck to everyone who attended and those who didn't attend. But if you think of any additional questions later, definitely feel free to respond back to us to that follow-up email, and we'll get you the answers you need. All right, and if you are interested in using Achieve, definitely sign up for that webinar as well. You can go to iClicker.com. There's a webinars button at the bottom of the page. So with that, thanks for joining us today, and we hope you learned something, and we'll enjoy setting up Froster and GradeSync.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey Diane, don't know if you're still on. I just dismissed everyone, but I'll go through the questions and.
Yeah, I was just on just in case.
Okay.
Follow up. I just saw your Slack message. I'm like,
Oh yeah. Hopefully I.
Yeah, that's fine. Right?
Okay.
I mean, I'm just like, because I don't have the final date for the cutover.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to, like, someone asked specifically if they could switch in the middle of the term, and then this guy was concerned about switching in the middle of the term, so he wanted to know if there was like a hard
Yeah, there's
deadline.
no hard date.
But I told him it's yeah, flexible. But
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna, like I said, we're not turning off anything. Unlike like iClicker 5, like, well, this is not gonna work after this date.
yeah.
As far as I know, there's no plans to turn that off, but we're also not gonna maintain it. So if something happens to it, right?
Right.
So yeah, we're just sunsetting it where, anyway, yeah. I think the plan is, try to push for fall, and then by end of year to really to announce like, hey, it's, we're like, it's really like full, like we're not, if something happens, you need troubleshooting, or like forget it. Like you can't get off of it. So yeah. Anyway, okay.
All right.
I told you there's never a problem about my
Yeah,
questions for
you were
LMS stuff. I'm
right.
like,
Like they just kept coming in, and they were all questions that usually I can like answer the questions on my own, but I was like, I'll save this one for the end.
every time I've done this like I get questioned, I'm like, holy cow.
Like,
Yeah,
I've
so
never thought of that before.
yeah. Well, I like the first like, hey, what about this? How about this thing? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Sounds complicated. We're gonna have to look at that. I don't know, but yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds like a bug if it's a co-teacher and the co-instructor does a sync, and if it creates a different thing, like that's weird. So we would probably have to look at that.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know if they're like if they mean co-instructors like in iClicker or like if they all have their own, like they're just co-instructors with separate courses.
Right. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. It's a good question. Like I don't know
So
about
I
that.
yeah,
Like, are they right? I mean, it could be that there's different instructors for different sections and different courses going into the same shell course, right? Or like you said, it's the iClicker course that's shared, and they're doing like it was a little unclear, but
yeah,
more than I could answer in 30 seconds.
yeah. All right.
Anyway, okay, cool.
All right,
Thank
cool.
you.
And let me know, should I go ahead and post the D2L admin guide on the support site? Or
Well, no, because I mean, remember we took down all the,
no, I
we
mean,
took everything. Oh, to create the article?
yeah, to create the private link.
You can start doing that. That's fine.
Okay.
You have that, right?
I don't know if I do.
Okay,
I
I'll
might.
send it to you just in case.
I wasn't sure if like more changes would be coming,
There
so like,
might be, because there have been with this, back and forth in the last few weeks.
okay.
But even if you want to start it and be like, well, I added this step, but
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
not a huge rush. I think it's fine to send folks the Google Doc for now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I wouldn't worry too much about it. While it's in
I have
beta, it's
plenty of
fine.
other things to do, so.
Yeah, like that instructor FSSO thing. I need to get you that
Oh yeah.
information for that.
Oh, and I have like for you to review, I have the new instructor quick start guides that go with the instructor kits.
Oh my God. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Woohoo! Yeah, the ones that were like
Woohoo.
super outdated.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think those have been updated in forever. So,
Yeah, yeah. So
hmm.
that's coming.
Hmm. Yeah, I was going through this, like, I was kind of like, there's a lot of material. Like, well, sorry, I'm not going to show LTI, but it's scary. I haven't done the LTI thing in a while, so anyway,
Yeah,
okay.
that was great though. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. Although I have to say, it's not my favorite thing to do this, but yeah.
But you're so good at it.
Oh, am I?
Yes.
Ugh. Okay, well, hopefully folks got something out of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, based on the kinds of questions that were coming in, people were definitely paying attention.
Well, that's good. Were they? Can you tell? Were they mostly admins at this
Yeah,
thing, or?
so what happened was it's a whole thing. Marketing like broke the webinar registration somehow.
Oh.
Yeah. And then the CRS team like personally like reached out to all their CTLs to invite them to this
Hmm.
webinar, and then the registration broke. So
Oh
anyway,
my God.
I manually added all these CRS admin people.
I see. Oh
Uh,
my. Do you know if Judy was there?
yeah, Judy came.
Oh, she was.
She asked so she asked a question. I didn't like ask it specifically,
Oh.
but she said this won't work for a course with hundreds of students so not really a question, just a statement,
Oh. Or they go to any
where they're
section?
allowed to attend any session
That's
during the
correct.
day.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
so that was kind of a question that got asked in a way.
yeah,
We
yeah,
don't accommodate that. I mean, that's kind of a weird thing, because I mean, even the LMS doesn't really accommodate that.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's just like what? Like, oh, well, here's how the enrollment works, but we're ignoring it. Do you accommodate that? It's like, what? Uh, well, no, we're using the enrollment key that you're ignoring. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, yeah, okay. But like I said, if you tell people they have to go to their class, and if they don't, they need to get like permission, and then you
Yeah,
manually move their score over. That's, I mean, I don't know. Frankly, I would think that's how it should normally kind of work. But okay,
I know.
yeah. Well, that's something we can look at in the future. That's a pretty difficult puzzle to
Yeah,
put together. We'd have to almost like group iClicker courses and say within this group, do a thing where I don't know it. Ugh.
yeah. I mean, the
So,
only thing I like remember distinctly from Heidi at Waterloo is she did that she had this course set up, and like she did simple LTI and had a grade calculation set up in D2, I think it was D2L, that automatically multiplied every student's score by 3.
oh my God,
So that,
really?
like, because like each, there were 3 sessions they
Oh,
could choose from. So if they, as long as they went to one of the 3 sessions and they
that's
multiply the score
interesting.
by 3, and yeah, then they get their
Hey,
full.
whatever they want to do, man. That's weird. I would think that you'd want to just do the 3 separates and then say like take the highest score out of the 3.
Oh,
Oh,
well,
well, no, because the total though, it's the total. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting and weird,
yeah,
but
yeah.
okay.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Hmm. It's a puzzle,
Yep.
but all right. Well,
All right. Well, thanks again, and
talk to you later.
talk
Well,
to you later.
all right. Bye.
Bye, Diane.